The handcuffs clicked shut around 17-year-old Zara Mitchell's wrists with a sound that echoed through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. The cold metal bit into her dark skin as Officer Jake Brennan yanked her from the plush leather seat, her Harvard sweatshirt bunching up as 50 passengers held up their phones, capturing every second of her humiliation. "You picked the wrong day to play pretend, sweetheart." Brennan sneered his badge, catching the overhead lights as he dragged her toward the jet bridge. "Time to learn what happens when kids like you try to sit where you don't belong." They thought she was a fraud. They thought she was a criminal. They thought she was powerless. But as the officer pulled her down the aisle while passengers gasped and cameras rolled, Zara didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply looked him dead in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "My father isn't going to like this." Brennan laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the cabin walls. He had no idea that the phone call he was about to interrupt didn't just book a plane ticket. It was about to ground an entire airline and destroy every person who had laid a finger on Marcus Mitchell's daughter. The flight wasn't just delayed. In exactly 19 minutes, it would be permanently canceled by the man who controlled the fuel that kept Delta Sky Airlines in the air. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments below because this story is reaching people all over the world, and I want to know where justice matters to you. And if what you're about to see makes your blood boil the way it did mine, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because stories like this deserve to be heard. They deserve to be shared. And they deserve to remind us that sometimes karma arrives in the form of a private jet and a father who refuses to let his daughter be treated like anything less than the queen she is. The Boeing 777, operated by Delta Sky Airlines, had been sitting at Gate 47 of Los Angeles International Airport for exactly 8 minutes when everything went wrong. The smell of conditioned leather and expensive cologne filled the first-class cabin, that distinctive scent of exclusivity that separated the privileged from everyone else. For most people, turning left when boarding an aircraft was a lifelong dream, a bucket list moment they'd save for years to experience. For Zara Mitchell, it was simply Tuesday. She had flown first class dozens of times, usually with her father on business trips or family vacations to places most teenagers only saw in magazines. Today was different, though. Today, she was flying alone. The cabin was a sanctuary of muted conversations and the gentle hum of air conditioning. Zara adjusted her noise-canceling headphones over her ears, drowning out the ambient sounds of the busy airport tarmac visible through the oval windows. She was dressed for comfort, not to impress anyone. Her oversized Harvard University sweatshirt hung loose on her slender frame, paired with black leggings and worn Converse sneakers that had carried her through 4 years of high school. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her face was free of makeup. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked like a scholarship student who might have scraped together enough frequent flyer miles for a lucky upgrade. That assumption would prove to be their biggest mistake. Zara settled into Seat 1A, the premium position in the first-class cabin. The lie-flat pod came complete with a sliding privacy door, a 14-inch entertainment screen, and enough space to spread out her study materials. She pulled a thick SAT prep book from her canvas tote bag, its pages already filled with highlighted passages and handwritten notes in the margins. She had a Harvard University early admission interview in Boston tomorrow morning. At 17, she was already being courted by the business school's professors who had heard about her innovative approach to supply chain management, a passion she'd inherited from watching her father build his empire from nothing. The piece lasted exactly 4 minutes. "Excuse me, I think you're confused." The voice cut through Zara's concentration like a knife. It was shrill, dripping with a mixture of condescension and barely contained rage. The woman speaking wasn't whispering. She wanted everyone in first class to hear exactly what she thought about the young black girl who dared to sit in the front of the plane. Zara didn't look up immediately, assuming the woman was speaking to someone else. A manicured hand adorned with a diamond ring the size of a marble tapped aggressively against the shell of her seat pod, the sharp sound echoing in the quiet cabin. "Young lady, I said you are confused." This time, Zara slid her headphones down to rest around her neck and looked up. Standing in the aisle like an avenging angel of privilege was a woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of a country club membership directory from 1955. Vivian Thornfield was in her early 60s, wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Every strand of her silver blonde hair was sprayed into perfect submission, and her face was set in an expression of such profound disgust that it seemed permanently etched into her features. She clutched a crocodile skin Birkin bag worth more than a semester at Harvard. "Can I help you?" Zara asked, her voice calm and measured, despite the woman's obvious hostility. "You can help yourself by gathering your things and moving back to economy where you belong." Vivian snapped her voice loud enough to make the businessman in seat 1B look up from his Wall Street Journal. "This is first class, specifically row 1. My row." Zara blinked once, processing the audacity of what she'd just heard. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her boarding pass, checking it against the seat number on the overhead bin. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but my boarding pass says 1A. I think you might be mistaken." Vivian Thornfield, whose name appeared on hospital wings and charity galas throughout the tri-state area, let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She turned to the other first-class passengers seeking an audience for her performance. "Did you hear that? She thinks she has a legitimate ticket. It's obviously a system error, or she printed something fake." She turned back to Zara, her blue eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "Listen to me, little girl. My husband Robert is a Platinum Elite member with Delta Sky Airlines. We always sit in row 1. Always." Vivian's voice rose with each word, drawing stares from throughout the cabin. "I don't know how someone like you slipped through the cracks, but I am not spending 8 hours across the country staring at the back of your head while you dirty up the upholstery with whatever products you put in that hair." The casual racism hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one spoke up. They were all waiting to see how this would play out, their phones already in their hands. Zara's expression didn't change, but something hardened in her dark eyes. She had dealt with people like Vivian Thornfield her entire life. Being the daughter of Marcus Mitchell, CEO of Titan Industries, and one of the most powerful men in American aviation, meant she navigated spaces of extreme wealth daily. It also meant she knew exactly how these people operated when they thought no one important was watching. Ma'am Zara said, her voice dropping an octave and becoming cooler. "I paid for my ticket. I suggest you check your own boarding pass. Perhaps you're in 1F. "I am never in F." Vivian shrieked, her composure finally cracking completely. She pressed the flight attendant call button repeatedly, stabbing it like she was trying to puncture the aircraft itself. But Zara wasn't moving. She had learned the rules of this game years ago, and for the first time in her life she held all the cards. Or so she thought. The flight attendant call button continued to chime as Vivian Thornfield's rage reached a crescendo. But to understand how we got to this moment, we need to rewind and meet the extraordinary young woman at the center of this storm. Zara Mitchell hadn't always known she was different. As a child, she thought everyone's father owned buildings that stretched into the clouds and had meetings with people whose faces appeared on magazine covers. She thought every family had drivers and security teams and vacation homes in 3 different countries. The awakening came when she was 12 years old. It was a Saturday afternoon in Beverly Hills, and Zara had convinced her mother to let her shop for her own clothes instead of having them delivered to the house. She wanted to feel normal, to browse through racks like other kids her age did in the movies. She had walked into an upscale boutique wearing ripped jeans and a plain t-shirt, her allowance money burning a hole in her pocket. The moment she stepped through the glass doors, conversations stopped. Eyes followed her every movement. A sales associate with bleached blonde hair and a fake smile began trailing 3 steps behind her, pretending to straighten merchandise that was already perfectly arranged. "Excuse me," the woman had said after Zara had been browsing for 10 minutes. Are you looking for someone? Because if you're here to meet your employer, the service entrance is around back. Zara had stood there confused. I'm sorry. We don't allow solicitors in the store, honey. And we definitely don't allow theft. I've been watching you, and I think it's time for you to leave before I call security. That was the first time Zara understood that her skin color spoke louder than her designer sneakers or her father's bank account. The woman saw a young black girl and immediately assumed she was either a servant or a criminal. Never a customer, never someone who belonged. Her mother had arrived 20 minutes later, flanked by their lawyer and a photographer from TMZ who had been tipped off about the incident. The boutique manager's face had gone white as he realized exactly whose daughter his employee had just accused of theft. The store closed permanently 6 months later. That night, as Zara lay in her canopy bed overlooking the Pacific Ocean, her mother sat on the edge of the mattress and stroked her hair. Baby girl, she had said softly, there are going to be people in this world who look at your beautiful brown skin and decide they know everything about you before you even open your mouth. They're going to assume you don't belong in the same rooms they do, that you don't deserve the same opportunities, the same respect, the same basic human dignity. Zara had nodded, tears still fresh on her cheeks. But here's what I want you to remember, her mother continued. Your father built an empire from nothing because he refused to let other people's assumptions define his limitations. He turned every closed door into a reason to build his own building. And someday, when you're ready, you're going to do the same thing. What if I'm not as strong as Daddy? Zara had whispered. Her mother smiled. Sweetheart, strength isn't about having the biggest voice in the room. It's about knowing your worth even when everyone else refuses to see it. And your worth isn't determined by whether some ignorant person in a store thinks you belong there. Your worth is determined by how you choose to carry yourself when the world tries to make you small. Those words had become Zara's armor over the years. Every time someone questioned her presence in advanced placement classes, every time a teacher assumed she was only there because of diversity quotas, every time someone looked surprised that she could afford the same luxuries they took for granted, she remembered her mother's voice. Never let them make you smaller, baby. Now, 5 years later, sitting in first class while Vivian Thornfield had what could only be described as a public meltdown, Zara felt that same familiar sensation of being judged by the color of her skin rather than the content of her character. But this time was different. This time she wasn't a confused 12-year-old who didn't understand why adults were being cruel. This time she knew exactly what was happening and she was prepared for war. Meanwhile, 12 miles away in a gleaming conference room on the 42nd floor of the Titan Industries headquarters in downtown Los Angeles, Marcus Mitchell was in the middle of the most important business negotiation of his career. The man sitting across from him represented a consortium of European aviation companies that wanted to purchase Titan Industries' revolutionary new fuel efficiency technology. The deal was worth $2.8 billion and would establish Titan as the dominant force in global aviation fuel supply for the next 2 decades. Marcus had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Every calculation had been double-checked. Every legal document had been reviewed by teams of lawyers. Every potential objection had been anticipated and prepared for. This was the culmination of everything he had worked toward since building his first refueling station in a parking lot in South Chicago 25 years ago. But to understand Marcus Mitchell's empire, you need to understand how it began. He grew up in the Robert Taylor Homes, a public housing project on Chicago's South Side that most people only knew about from crime statistics on the evening news. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. His father had been gone since before Marcus could form memories. The projects were supposed to be temporary housing, a stepping stone to something better. For most families, they became a trap that lasted generations. Marcus decided early that he was going to be different. He was 8 years old when he started washing cars in the parking lot of a nearby gas station for $2 each. By the time he was 12, he had saved enough money to buy a used lawnmower and start cutting grass in the wealthier neighborhoods 15 miles north. By 16, he was running a small landscaping crew with 6 of his classmates. The summer before his senior year of high school, Marcus was cutting grass at a small private airport when he noticed something that would change his life forever. The planes that landed there needed fuel, but the nearest supplier was 30 miles away. Every delivery cost extra money because of the distance, and sometimes flights were delayed waiting for fuel trucks to arrive. Marcus saw an opportunity. He used every penny he had saved from his landscaping business, plus a loan from a neighborhood credit union that took a chance on an 18-year-old with more dreams than collateral to purchase his first fuel truck. Within 6 months, he had exclusive contracts with 12 small airports across Illinois. By the time he was 25, Titan Industries was supplying fuel to major airports in 6 states. By 30, he had expanded into aircraft maintenance and logistics coordination. By 35, his company was handling fuel distribution for 40% of domestic flights in the United States. Today, at 45, Marcus Mitchell controlled the largest aviation fuel supply network in North America. His contracts with airlines, airports, and private aircraft companies generated $17 billion in annual revenue. Titan Industries employed over 40,000 people across 4 countries and maintained strategic partnerships with every major player in the aviation industry. But none of that mattered when his phone buzzed with an incoming call from his daughter. Marcus glanced at his watch. Zara's flight to Boston wasn't scheduled to take off for another 30 minutes. She only called during travel if something was wrong. "Gentlemen," he said to the 5 executives around the conference table, "I need to take this. My daughter is traveling today." He pressed the answer button and immediately heard something that made his blood run cold. There was commotion in the background, raised voices, and underneath it all, the sound of his baby girl trying not to cry. Daddy Zara's voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor she was trying to hide. "What's wrong, sweetheart? What's happening, Daddy? I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said, her words measured and precise, the way he had taught her to speak when she was scared. "I'm on the plane and there's a problem. A woman is saying I don't belong in first class, and she called the flight attendant. They're saying my ticket is fake." Marcus stood up from the conference table, every muscle in his body tensing. "Are you safe? Has anyone touched you?" "Not yet. But Daddy, I think they called security. I can hear them talking about having me removed." That was when Marcus Mitchell, one of the most powerful men in American business, made a decision that would change dozens of lives forever. "Zara, I need you to stay calm and stay in your seat. Don't move, don't argue, don't give them any reason to escalate. And whatever you do, keep your phone on. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to remind them who your father is." Marcus ended the call and looked at the 5 men around the table, each of whom represented billions of dollars in potential business partnerships. "This meeting is over," he said simply. "Mr. Mitchell," one of them started to protest. "We've been negotiating for months. My daughter is being harassed on an airplane because of the color of her skin." Marcus interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "There is no business deal, no contract, no amount of money in the world that is more important than her safety and dignity. This meeting is over. My assistant will reschedule when I'm available." He walked out of the conference room without looking back, leaving $2.8 billion on the table like it was pocket change. Because Marcus Mitchell had learned a long time ago that power without purpose was just wealth. And his purpose was making sure his daughter never had to feel the way he had felt as a kid growing up in the projects when the world told him he didn't matter. Today, the world was about to learn that Zara Mitchell mattered more than their entire airline industry. Back in the first-class cabin of Delta Sky Airlines Flight 447, the tension had reached a breaking point. Vivian Thornfield stood in the aisle like a sentinel of privilege, her Chanel suit armor against any suggestion that she might be wrong. The other passengers had given up any pretense of minding their own business and were openly staring at the confrontation unfolding in row 1. "Where is the flight attendant?" Vivian demanded, pressing the call button again with enough force to crack a nail. "I refuse to sit here while this person takes up space that belongs to paying customers." Zara remained seated, her SAT prep book still open in her lap, though she had long since stopped reading. She could feel the eyes of 50 passengers burning into the back of her head, waiting to see if the young black girl would finally break under the pressure. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. From across the aisle, Elena Rodriguez watched the scene unfold with growing disgust. Elena was 26 years old, a lifestyle influencer with 2.3 million followers across Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. She had built her platform documenting luxury travel-exclusive events and behind-the-scenes access to the kind of life most people only dreamed about. But this wasn't content. This was injustice happening in real time. Elena pulled out her phone and opened Instagram Live. Within seconds, viewers began flooding in, drawn by her notification that something important was happening on Flight 447. "Hey guys," she whispered to her phone, angling it to capture both Vivian and Zara in the frame. "I'm currently witnessing something absolutely disgusting on my flight to Boston. This woman is literally trying to get this teenage girl thrown off the plane because she doesn't think black people belong in first class." The live comment feed exploded with outrage and support. Elena's followers were already starting to share the stream, and the viewer count was climbing rapidly. That was when Rebecca Santos finally arrived. Rebecca was 29 years old, 5 years into her career with Delta Sky Airlines and desperately seeking promotion to senior flight attendant. She knew that keeping high-status passengers happy was the key to advancing in the airline industry, and Vivian Thornfield was clearly someone important. The diamond jewelry alone probably cost more than Rebecca made in a year. "Mrs. Thornfield," Rebecca said with a practiced smile, "I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. How can I assist you today?" Vivian's face lit up with vindication. "Finally, Rebecca, I need you to remove this person from my seat immediately. She's clearly confused about where she belongs, and she's making the other passengers extremely uncomfortable." Rebecca looked at Zara for the first time, taking in her casual clothes, her youth, her race. The calculation happened instantly in Rebecca's mind, the same bias that had been programmed into her by years of working in an industry where wealth and status were usually determined by appearance. The girl didn't look like she belonged in first class. Miss Rebecca said, leaning over the pod wall with a forced smile, "May I please see your boarding pass?" Zara held it up without a word. The barcode was clearly visible along with her name and seat assignment. 1A. First class, purchased and paid for. Rebecca took the pass and scanned it with her handheld device. The system confirmed what was already obvious: legitimate ticket, legitimate passenger, legitimate seat assignment. But Vivian was watching, and Rebecca knew that customer service meant keeping the right customers happy. "I'm showing a system error." Rebecca lied, smoothly handing the boarding pass back. "It appears there was a double booking situation. Mrs. Thornfield is a Legacy Platinum member, so we'll need to find you another seat." Elena's live stream was now being watched by over 50,000 people, and the comments were coming in so fast she couldn't read them all. But the message was clear. This was discrimination, plain and simple, and her followers were furious. "This is unbelievable," Elena whispered to her phone. "The flight attendant just lied." I watched her scan the ticket. It worked perfectly, and now she's claiming there's a system error because this racist woman complained. Zara looked directly at Rebecca. "Ma'am, with respect, that's not accurate. Your scanner confirmed my boarding pass. There is no double booking error. This woman simply doesn't want to sit near a black person, and you're enabling her racism instead of following airline policy." The directness of Zara's response caught Rebecca off guard. Most teenagers would have been intimidated by now, backing down in the face of adult authority. But there was something in this girl's voice, a confidence that suggested she was used to being heard in rooms where important decisions were made. "Miss, there seems to be a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Zara interrupted calmly. "According to Delta's own policies, which are available on your website, passengers cannot be removed from confirmed seats due to complaints about their race appearance or perceived social status. What you're doing right now is illegal discrimination, and it's being recorded by multiple passengers." Rebecca's smile faltered. The girl was right about the policies, and more concerning, she seemed to know exactly what she was talking about. Vivian stepped forward, her patience finally exhausted. "I don't care about policies. I care about the fact that I paid full price for first-class service, and part of that service is not having to sit next to people who clearly don't belong here." She gestured at Zara dismissively. "Look at her torn sweatshirt, cheap shoes, probably never even been on an airplane before today. She's either a diversity hire getting a free ride, or she stole that ticket from someone who actually earned it." The cabin fell completely silent. Even the business travelers who had been trying to ignore the confrontation looked up from their laptops and newspapers. Vivian had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Elena tilted her phone to get a better angle on Vivian's face. "Did everyone just hear that? This woman literally just said that black people can't earn first-class tickets? In 2024. On camera. The live stream viewer count had climbed to over 100,000. Screenshots of Vivian's face were already being shared across social media platforms, along with clips of her most offensive statements. Zara remained perfectly still, but something had changed in her expression. The polite, accommodating teenager was gone, replaced by someone much older and more dangerous. "Ma'am," she said, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made everyone in the cabin lean forward to listen. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Vivian laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the cabin walls. "Really? And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it, little girl? Write a complaint letter?" "No," Zara said simply. "I'm going to make a phone call." Rebecca sensed that the situation was spiraling beyond her control. The other passengers were clearly sympathetic to the girl. Elena Rodriguez was broadcasting everything to her massive social media following, and now the teenager was making threats about phone calls. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to comply with crew instructions and move to an available seat in economy. If you refuse to cooperate, that's considered interfering with flight crew duties, which is a federal offense. And I'm informing you that your instruction is based on racial bias, not legitimate airline policy." Zara shot back, her composure finally beginning to crack. "You have no legal authority to remove a paying passenger because another passenger doesn't like their skin color." Vivian crossed her arms triumphantly. "Call airport security. Call the police. Get her off this plane before I file complaints with corporate, the FAA, and every aviation authority I can think of. My husband knows people." Rebecca nodded reluctantly. She had hoped the girl would back down, but now there was no choice. Customer service meant supporting the passenger with the most influence, and that was clearly Mrs. Thornfield. "I'll speak to the captain about requesting airport security," she said. As Rebecca walked toward the cockpit, Zara pulled out her phone. She had one bar of signal left before the doors closed and the aircraft entered cellular dead zones. She opened her contacts and scrolled to the entry labeled Dad. Her finger hovered over the call button. She wanted to handle this herself. She was 17 years old, practically an adult, certainly old enough to fight her own battles. Her father had taught her to be independent, to stand up for herself, to never back down from people who tried to make her feel small. But as she looked around the cabin at the sea of faces watching her humiliation, she realized this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every young black person who would board an airplane after her, every teenager who would be judged by their appearance instead of their character, every child who would grow up believing they didn't deserve to take up space in the world. Elena was still streaming live, and her viewer count had climbed to over 200,000 people. The hashtag flight discrimination was already trending on Twitter. This moment was being preserved for posterity, and Zara had a choice to make. She could handle this quietly, accept the humiliation move to economy class, and file a complaint later that would disappear into the airline's customer service bureaucracy. Or she could make one phone call that would turn this airplane into the epicenter of a national conversation about dignity justice and what happened when privileged people forgot that power came in many different forms. Zara pressed the call button. The phone rang once before a familiar voice answered. "Sweetheart." "What's wrong, Daddy?" she said, her voice finally betraying the tears she had been holding back. "I need you." Across the cabin, Vivian Thornfield smiled with satisfaction. The girl was finally calling someone to come pick her up, probably her parents or maybe a guardian. Soon this unpleasant situation would be resolved and she could enjoy her flight in peace. She had no idea that the person on the other end of that phone call controlled the fuel supply for the aircraft she was sitting in. In exactly 15 minutes, Vivian Thornfield's world was going to end. The cockpit of Flight 447 was a sanctuary of controlled chaos filled with the quiet beeps and hums of advanced avionics preparing for departure. Captain Thomas Walsh had been flying commercial aircraft for 23 years, accumulating over 18,000 flight hours without a single incident on his record. He was known throughout Delta Sky Airlines for his calm professionalism and his ability to handle difficult situations without drama. But when Rebecca Santos knocked on the cockpit door and explained the situation in first class, Captain Walsh felt his stomach drop. Passenger disputes were never simple, especially when they involved accusations of discrimination. These situations had a way of escalating beyond anyone's control, and the last thing he wanted was an incident that would end up in the media. "Rebecca, are you absolutely certain that removal is necessary?" he asked, reviewing the federal regulations on his tablet. Removing a passenger for a seating dispute requires very specific circumstances, and from what you're describing, this seems more like a customer service issue than a safety concern. Rebecca had rehearsed this conversation during her walk to the cockpit. She knew that Captain Walsh was cautious about anything that might generate negative publicity for the airline, so she needed to frame the situation in terms he would understand. "Captain Mrs. Thornfield is threatening to file formal complaints with corporate if we don't resolve this immediately. She claims the passenger's ticket is fraudulent and she's becoming increasingly agitated. The situation is disrupting the entire first-class cabin, and I'm concerned about passenger safety if this escalates further." Captain Walsh sighed. Vivian Thornfield was indeed a Platinum Elite member, the kind of high-value customer that the airline bent over backwards to accommodate. Her family had probably generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue over the years, and keeping her happy was a business priority. On the other hand, removing a passenger always carried the risk of bad publicity, especially if the passenger was a minor. "Have you verified the ticket yourself?" "Yes, sir, but the system has been having some issues with double bookings lately. It's possible that both passengers have legitimate confirmations for the same seat." That was a lie, but Rebecca was committed to her course of action. She had already told Mrs. Thornfield that the girl would be removed, and backing down now would make her look incompetent. "Call airport security," Captain Walsh decided reluctantly. "But make sure they understand this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. We just need assistance with passenger relocation, not an arrest." Rebecca nodded and returned to the cabin where the tension had somehow managed to increase even further. Zara was still on her phone, speaking in quiet tones to someone who was clearly agitated on the other end. Elena Rodriguez had positioned herself to get better camera angles of both the girl and Mrs. Thornfield, and her live stream viewer count had climbed to over 300,000 people. Other passengers had pulled out their phones as well. David Park, a businessman in seat 3C, was recording video on his iPhone while live tweeting the incident to his 40,000 followers. Sarah Thompson, a college student in 2B, was posting updates to her Instagram story with increasingly angry captions about racism in the aviation industry. The incident was going viral in real time. Rebecca picked up the cabin phone and dialed airport security. "This is Delta Flight 447 at Gate 47. We need assistance with a passenger removal situation in first class. Non-violent, but the passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions." The response came quickly. "Security en route. ETA 4 minutes." Vivian Thornfield practically glowed with satisfaction. Finally, some common sense. "Thank you, Rebecca. I knew you would handle this appropriately." Zara ended her phone call and looked up at Rebecca with an expression that made the flight attendant suddenly nervous. There was no fear in the teenager's eyes, no anxiety about the approaching security officers. Instead, there was something that looked almost like pity. "Ma'am," Zara said calmly, "you might want to reconsider your course of action. My father is not pleased with how this situation has been handled." Rebecca forced a laugh. "Honey, I'm sure your father is upset, but airport security deals with angry parents all the time. This is a federal matter now, and your father's feelings don't override aviation law." "My father doesn't just have feelings about aviation law," Zara replied quietly. "He helps write it." That cryptic statement sent a chill through Rebecca's spine, but before she could ask what it meant, heavy footsteps echoed down the jet bridge. Officer Jake Brennan had arrived. Brennan was 38 years old, a 15-year veteran of the Los Angeles Airport Police Department who had handled hundreds of passenger disputes during his career. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, built like a linebacker, and had the kind of authoritative presence that usually ended arguments before they started. He also had very definite opinions about teenagers who caused problems on airplanes. Brennan walked into the first-class cabin like he owned it. His uniform crisp, his badge polished, his hand resting casually on his radio. He took one look at Zara and immediately understood what kind of situation he was dealing with. Young, black, sitting where she probably didn't belong. "Ma'am," he said to Rebecca, "I understand we have a passenger refusing to follow crew instructions." "Yes, officer. This young woman is claiming to have a first-class ticket, but we believe there's been a fraudulent booking situation. She's refusing to move to an available seat in economy." Brennan looked at Zara, taking in her casual clothes, her youth, her race. In his experience, kids like this were usually trying to scam the airline somehow, either with fake tickets or by claiming upgrades they hadn't paid for. "Miss, I'm going to need to see some identification and your boarding documentation." Zara handed over her driver's license and boarding pass without argument. Brennan examined them both, noting that the ID appeared legitimate and the boarding pass looked real. But appearances could be deceiving, and Rebecca had already explained the situation. "These documents appear to be in order," he said carefully, "but the flight crew has determined that there's been a booking error. I need you to gather your belongings and come with me." "Officer," Zara said, her voice still maddeningly calm, "before you make any decisions you might regret, I suggest you verify the authenticity of my ticket with your supervisor. I also suggest you review Delta Sky Airlines policies regarding passenger removal for discriminatory complaints." Brennan's jaw tightened. He didn't appreciate being lectured about policy by a teenager, especially one who was clearly trying to delay the inevitable. "Miss, I've been doing this for 15 years. I know airline policy, and I know when someone is trying to cause problems. You have 2 choices. You can come with me voluntarily, or I can arrest you for interfering with flight operations. Which would you prefer?" Elena Rodriguez zoomed in on Brennan's face with her phone camera. Her live stream had now reached 500,000 viewers, and the comments were flooding in faster than she could read. But the consensus was clear. This was racial profiling at its worst, and people were furious. Officer Elena called out, "Are you seriously about to arrest a teenager for sitting in a seat she paid for?" Brennan turned toward her with annoyance. "Ma'am, I need you to stop recording and stay out of police business. This is public business." Elena shot back. "We're documenting discrimination, and 500,000 people are watching you decide whether to do the right thing or be complicit in racism." That number caught Brennan's attention. 500,000 people were watching. This situation had the potential to become a public relations nightmare, but he was already committed to his course of action. Vivian Thornfield stepped forward, clearly enjoying the drama. "Officer, this girl has been disruptive since she boarded. She's making wild claims about her father and threatening the flight crew. For all we know, that ticket is stolen." Zara looked at Vivian with something approaching amazement. "Ma'am, you just accused me of theft in front of a police officer and 500,000 witnesses. I hope you understand the legal implications of making false accusations." "I'm not making false accusations," Vivian snapped. "I'm stating obvious facts. Girls like you don't belong in first class unless someone made a mistake or you're running some kind of scam." The cabin fell silent. Even Officer Brennan looked uncomfortable with the naked racism in Vivian's statement. Zara stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed maybe 120 pounds, but something in her posture commanded attention. "Officer Brennan," she said clearly, "I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this is your last opportunity to make the right decision." Brennan's hand moved closer to his handcuffs. "Miss, you need to stop talking and start walking. My name is Zara Mitchell. My father is Marcus Mitchell, CEO of Titan Industries. Titan Industries supplies aviation fuel to 87% of all commercial flights in the United States, including every single Delta Sky Airlines aircraft. This airplane cannot take off without fuel that my father's company provides." She paused, letting that information sink in. 3 minutes ago, I was on the phone with my father explaining how I was being discriminated against by your airline and harassed by your officers. He is currently in his car driving to this airport, and he is not happy." Brennan laughed. "Right. And I'm the President of the United States. Nice try, kid. You don't believe me?" Zara reached for her phone. "Call him yourself. His direct number is 555-0147. Or better yet, call Delta's Operations Center and ask them what happens when Titan Industries decides to stop providing fuel to a specific aircraft." Rebecca had gone pale. She had never heard of Titan Industries, but something in the girl's voice suggested this wasn't a bluff. Vivian Thornfield, however, remained convinced that this was all an elaborate performance. "Oh, please, if your father really owned some big company, you wouldn't be dressed like a scholarship student. You'd have a designer bag and jewelry and actual first-class clothes." Zara smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. "Ma'am, the difference between old money and new money is that old money doesn't need to prove itself with designer labels. My father taught me that real power moves quietly." She looked directly at Officer Brennan, but sometimes when people mistake quiet power for weakness, it has to speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. Brennan had heard enough. This girl was clearly delusional, possibly mentally ill, and definitely disrupting a commercial flight. He reached for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for interfering with flight operations and making false statements to a police officer. You have the right to remain silent." The metal cuffs clicked around Zara's wrists with a sound that would haunt everyone in that cabin for the rest of their lives. Elena Rodriguez's live stream exploded with outrage, her comment feed moving so fast it was just a blur of angry text. Zara didn't resist. She didn't cry. She didn't scream or protest or beg. She simply looked Officer Jake Brennan in the eyes and said, "You picked the wrong day to play pretend sweetheart. My father isn't going to like this." As Brennan began dragging her toward the jet bridge, Zara's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed Dad in large letters. It was too late to answer. But at that exact moment, Marcus Mitchell's black Escalade was pulling into the airport's executive parking area, followed by 3 security vehicles and a legal team that had been assembled in under 10 minutes. The most powerful man in American aviation was about to remind everyone exactly what happened when someone put handcuffs on his daughter. The handcuffs around Zara Mitchell's wrists were cutting off her circulation, but she barely noticed the pain. She had been taught from a young age that dignity was a choice, and she chose it even as Officer Brennan dragged her down the aisle while 50 passengers recorded her humiliation. Elena Rodriguez's live stream had reached 750,000 viewers and counting. The hashtags Zara Mitchell Flight Discrimination and Delta Disgrace were trending worldwide. Screenshots of Vivian Thornfield's racist statements were being shared across every social media platform, and news outlets were already picking up the story. But none of the passengers or crew members on Flight 447 understood what was really happening. 12 miles away, in the back of a speeding Escalade, Marcus Mitchell was making phone calls that would reshape the aviation industry before his daughter's plane ever left the ground. "Luis," he said into his phone, speaking to Luis Martinez, his head of security. "I need you to coordinate with LAX ground control. Delta Flight 447 is not cleared for takeoff until I say so. Sir, what grounds do I give them for the delay? Tell them there's a security concern regarding the fuel supply. That's not technically a lie." His second call was to his chief operating officer. "Sarah, I need you to execute Protocol 7 on all Delta Sky Airlines contracts immediately." Protocol 7 was Titan Industries' nuclear option, a contractual clause that allowed them to suspend fuel delivery to any airline for safety and security concerns with just 1 hour's notice. It had never been used in the company's 25-year history. "Sir, that will ground their entire fleet. Are you sure my daughter just called me in tears because some racist passengers and airline employees put handcuffs on her for sitting in a seat she paid for?" "I am absolutely sure." Marcus's third call was to his legal department. "I need assault charges filed against the airport police officer who laid hands on my daughter. I need the flight attendant charged with filing a false police report. And I need a discrimination lawsuit prepared against Delta Sky Airlines for violation of federal civil rights law. Mr. Mitchell, we'll need to review the evidence. There are multiple video recordings of the incident being broadcast live to over 700,000 people. The evidence is already in the public record." His final call was to someone whose name appeared on few business cards but whose influence extended into every corner of American aviation. "Senator Williams. This is Marcus Mitchell. I need a favor." Meanwhile, back on Flight 447, Captain Walsh was growing increasingly concerned about the delay. They were now 30 minutes past their scheduled departure time, and passengers in economy were starting to complain loudly about the holdup. "Rebecca, what's the status on the passenger removal?" "Sir, airport security has the individual in custody, but there seems to be some kind of complication. I'm getting conflicting information from ground control." That was when Captain Walsh's radio crackled to life with a message that would change everything. "Delta 447, this is LAX ground control. You are not cleared for pushback or taxi. Remain at gate until further notice." "Ground control, Delta 447. What's the reason for the delay?" "Delta 447, we have received notice from your fuel supplier of a potential safety concern. Your aircraft is grounded pending inspection." Captain Walsh frowned. Fuel safety concerns were extremely rare, and they usually involved the entire airport, not a single aircraft. "Ground control, can you clarify the nature of the safety concern?" "Negative, Delta 447. Please contact your operations center for additional information." In the terminal, Officer Brennan was having the worst day of his 15-year career. The teenage girl he had arrested was sitting in an interrogation room, completely calm, refusing to answer questions and asking to speak to her attorney. That was unusual enough for a minor, but what was really bothering him were the phone calls. In the past 20 minutes, he had received calls from his sergeant, his lieutenant, his captain, and the airport police chief. All of them were asking about the same thing, the arrest of Zara Mitchell. Brennan. His captain had said, "I need you to walk me through this arrest step by step. I'm getting calls from people I've never heard of, and they all seem very interested in this girl." Now, as Brennan sat in his office trying to complete the paperwork, his phone rang again. "Airport Police Officer Brennan. Officer, this is Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. I understand you have arrested the daughter of Marcus Mitchell. Brennan nearly dropped the phone. A United States senator was calling him directly about his arrest. Ma'am, Yes, I arrested a minor who was disrupting flight operations. Officer Brennan, I want you to listen very carefully. Marcus Mitchell is one of the most important people in American aviation. His company controls the fuel supply for nearly every commercial flight in this country. If he decides that your airport is unsafe for his fuel trucks, every airline in Los Angeles will be grounded. Senator, I was just doing my job. Your job is about to become very complicated. Mr. Mitchell is en route to the airport with a team of federal attorneys. I suggest you review the circumstances of this arrest very carefully. The line went dead. Brennan sat in stunned silence for 30 seconds before grabbing his radio. Dispatch. I need the watch commander's office immediately, but it was already too late for damage control. At Gate 47, passengers were becoming increasingly agitated about the unexplained delay. The economy section was particularly restless, with travelers worried about missing connections and important meetings. That's when the announcement came over the airport's public address system. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an important announcement regarding Delta Flight 447. Due to circumstances beyond our control, this flight has been canceled. All passengers will be rebooked on the next available flights at no additional cost. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Passengers began shouting questions at the gate agents who clearly had no answers. Children started crying. Business travelers began making frantic phone calls, and the general chaos attracted the attention of airport security. But Elena Rodriguez, still live streaming from her phone, understood that something much bigger was happening. Guys, she told her viewers, this isn't just a canceled flight. This is about power, real power. And I think we're about to see exactly what happens when someone with real power decides to fight back. That's when the executive motorcade arrived. 3 black Escalades pulled up to the terminal's VIP entrance, followed by 2 additional vehicles carrying what were clearly federal agents. Airport personnel rushed to accommodate the unexpected arrival of whoever was important enough to command that kind of security detail. Marcus Mitchell stepped out of the lead vehicle wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who was accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room he entered. Behind him emerged a team of attorneys carrying briefcases, federal investigators wearing badges, and his personal security detail led by Luis Martinez. The airport's general manager, David Harrison, personally escorted Marcus through the terminal. Harrison had been briefed during the 5-minute walk from the parking garage. This was the man who controlled the fuel supply for LAX's biggest airline partner, and he was not happy. Mr. Mitchell Harrison said nervously, I want to assure you that we're investigating the incident involving your daughter with the utmost seriousness, Mr. Harrison. Marcus replied, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of barely controlled fury. My daughter called me 20 minutes ago to tell me that she had been handcuffed and arrested for the crime of being a young black woman sitting in first class. She is 17 years old. She has never been in trouble with the law, and she was traveling to Boston for a Harvard University interview. They reached the secure area where Zara was being held. Through the window, Marcus could see his daughter sitting at a metal table, still in handcuffs, still maintaining the dignity he had taught her to carry in every situation. That's when Marcus Mitchell, one of the most powerful men in American business, made a decision that would be remembered for decades. Mr. Harrison, I want you to understand something very clearly. In approximately 10 minutes, every Delta Sky Airlines aircraft in North America will receive notice that Titan Industries is suspending fuel delivery due to safety and security concerns. That includes the 127 planes currently in flight, the 89 planes preparing for departure, and the 412 planes scheduled to depart later today. Harrison's face went white. Sir, that would ground their entire fleet. Thousands of passengers would be stranded. Yes, it would. and it will happen unless everyone involved in this travesty is held accountable immediately. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from his operations center, Protocol 7 executed. All Delta flights nationwide grounded. Estimated cost $47 million per hour. Inside the interrogation room, Zara looked up as the door opened. Her father walked in, flanked by 2 federal attorneys and followed by Officer Brennan, who looked like he was about to be sick. "Baby girl," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside his daughter's chair and examining the red marks the handcuffs had left on her wrists. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, Daddy. They didn't hurt me. They just wouldn't listen." Marcus looked up at Officer Brennan with eyes that could have melted steel. "Officer, I understand you arrested my daughter for the federal crime of sitting while Black Mr. Mitchell. I was responding to a complaint from the airline that just lost $47 million in revenue because you decided to put handcuffs on a child." Marcus stood up slowly, and despite being only slightly taller than Brennan, he somehow seemed to tower over the police officer. "Sir, I was just following protocol. Your protocol was to arrest a minor without investigating the complaint, without verifying the facts, and without considering that multiple passengers were filming your actions." Marcus's voice never rose above conversational level, but every word hit like a hammer blow. One of the federal attorneys stepped forward. "Officer Brennan, I'm Special Agent Catherine Morrison with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. We'll be investigating this incident as a potential violation of federal civil rights law." Brennan's knees nearly buckled. Federal investigation, FBI involvement. This was supposed to be a simple passenger removal, not a career-ending catastrophe. "Can someone please remove these handcuffs from my daughter?" Marcus asked quietly. Brennan's hands shook as he unlocked the cuffs. The red marks on Zara's wrists were clear evidence of how tightly they had been applied. "Thank you," Marcus said. Then he turned to the federal attorney. "I want assault charges filed immediately. Sir, we'll need to complete our investigation." "Agent Morrison, my daughter's civil rights were violated by a law enforcement officer acting under color of law. That is a federal felony. The evidence is recorded on multiple devices and has been viewed by over 1 million people. How much investigation do you need?" Back at Gate 47, chaos was reaching epic proportions. News crews had arrived and were interviewing passengers about the discrimination incident and the mysterious flight cancellation. Social media was exploding with theories about what was happening, but the most important conversation was taking place between Marcus Mitchell and the people who had humiliated his daughter. Vivian Thornfield was sitting in the gate area frantically trying to reach her husband on her phone. The calls weren't going through because Robert Thornfield was currently in an emergency board meeting trying to explain to his investors why their biggest shipping contract had just been canceled without warning. "Mrs. Thornfield," a voice said behind her. She turned to see a tall black man in an expensive suit flanked by security personnel and followed by news cameras. "I'm Marcus Mitchell. I believe you've met my daughter." Vivian's mouth fell open as she finally understood who Zara really was. I didn't know. You didn't know what that black people can afford first-class tickets, that teenagers can come from wealthy families, or that actions have consequences." Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call while Vivian watched in growing horror. "Robert, this is Marcus Mitchell, CEO of Titan Industries. I'm calling to inform you that your shipping contracts with my company have been terminated effective immediately." He put the phone on speaker so Vivian could hear the response. "Marcus, what's this about? We've had a partnership for 12 years. Your wife spent the afternoon humiliating my daughter on an airplane because she didn't think black children belonged in first class. She called airport police and had my 17-year-old daughter arrested for the crime of sitting in a seat she paid for." Silence on the other end of the line. "Robert, your wife cost my daughter her dignity. So I'm costing you your company. Consider it an exchange rate." Marcus ended the call and looked at Vivian, whose face had gone from red to gray. Mrs. Thornfield, by my calculations, your husband's business will be bankrupt by Friday. Your house in the Hamptons, your yacht in Florida, your art collection, all of it will be sold to pay creditors. I hope humiliating a teenage girl was worth destroying your family's financial future." Vivian collapsed into a chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done. But Marcus wasn't finished. Rebecca Santos was escorted to the gate by airport security, her uniform disheveled, her career in ruins. She had been terminated by Delta Sky Airlines via a phone call from the CEO himself, who had personally apologized to Marcus Mitchell for his employees' actions. Ms. Santos Marcus said you had multiple opportunities to do the right thing today. You chose instead to enable racism and file false police reports. You'll never work in aviation again. As news of the incident spread, the consequences cascaded through the aviation industry like a tsunami. Delta's stock price plummeted as investors realized the company had lost its primary fuel supplier. Other airlines began distancing themselves from Delta's actions, fearing they might be next. But for Marcus Mitchell, this wasn't about business. It was about a father protecting his daughter and ensuring that no other child would endure what Zara had experienced. As he walked through the terminal, holding his daughter's hand, followed by news cameras, and watched by millions of people around the world, Marcus Mitchell had sent a message that would echo through every airport, every airline, and every boardroom in America. Power without purpose was just wealth. But power with purpose could change the world. And sometimes it only took 18 minutes to ground an entire airline and remind everyone that underestimating a quiet teenager in a Harvard sweatshirt was the most expensive mistake they would ever make. The terminal at Los Angeles International Airport had been transformed into what CNN would later describe as the epicenter of a corporate reckoning. News crews from every major network were broadcasting. Live passengers were giving interviews about what they had witnessed, and social media was exploding with support for Zara Mitchell and outrage at the treatment she had endured. But the real drama was happening in a conference room where Marcus Mitchell was methodically dismantling the careers and reputations of everyone who had wronged his daughter. Officer Jake Brennan sat across from a table filled with federal investigators, civil rights attorneys, and internal affairs officers from his own department. The 15-year veteran who had walked onto Flight 447 with complete confidence was now facing federal charges, the loss of his pension, and the end of his law enforcement career. Mr. Brennan said, "Agent Morrison from the FBI's Civil Rights Division, you arrested a minor for sitting in an airplane seat she had legally purchased. You did not investigate the complaint. You did not verify the facts, and you ignored multiple passengers who were telling you that the girl had done nothing wrong. Can you explain your reasoning?" Brennan's attorney leaned forward. "My client was responding to a complaint from airline personnel about a disruptive passenger. A 17-year-old girl sitting quietly with a book was disruptive." Agent Morrison's voice carried a tone of disbelief. Or was she disruptive because she was black and sitting in first class? The evidence was overwhelming. Elena Rodriguez's live stream had captured every moment of the confrontation, including Brennan's refusal to listen to passengers who were defending Zara. His own body camera footage showed him making assumptions about Zara's guilt without any investigation. Agent Morrison, Marcus Mitchell, spoke for the first time since entering the room. "I want this man charged with assault under color of law, violation of civil rights, and abuse of authority. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of federal law." Brennan's attorney tried one more time. "Mr. Mitchell, my client was following standard protocol." "Your client's standard protocol was to assume that black children don't belong in first class." Marcus interrupted. "That's not protocol. That's racism. And racism exercised under the authority of a police badge is a federal crime." Across the hall, Rebecca Santos was facing her own reckoning. The Delta Sky Airlines flight attendant had been terminated immediately after CEO Richard Anderson personally called Marcus Mitchell to apologize and promise a full investigation. Rebecca sat with her union representative, trying to understand how her career had evaporated in less than an hour. Miss Santos said, the airline's director of human resources, you filed a false report claiming there was a system error with the passenger's ticket. You ignored the fact that your scanner confirmed the ticket's validity. You called airport police on a minor who had committed no crime. Can you explain these actions? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. Mrs. Thornfield was a platinum member. She was very upset, and I thought, you thought that a racist passenger's complaints were more important than following airline policy and federal law. The HR director finished. Ms. Santos, you've not only been terminated, but we're forwarding this matter to the FAA for possible criminal charges related to filing false reports with airport security. Rebecca's union representative looked defeated. There was no defending what had happened. The entire incident was recorded from multiple angles, broadcast live to over 1 million viewers, and now being analyzed by federal investigators. Will I be able to work for other airlines? Rebecca asked desperately. The HR director's expression was grim. Ms. Santos, after today, I don't think you'll be able to work in the travel industry at all. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel suite overlooking the airport, Vivian Thornfield was discovering what financial ruin looked like in real time. Her phone had been ringing non-stop for an hour. Calls from her bank, her credit card companies, her lawyer, her accountant, and most frantically from her husband, Robert. Thornfield Industries had been Marcus Mitchell's client for 12 years, representing nearly 60% of their shipping volume. When Titan Industries canceled their contracts, it triggered a cascade of financial disasters that would take months to fully understand. Vivian, what the hell did you do? Robert's voice was barely controlled panic when she finally answered his call. Marcus Mitchell just destroyed our company. 12 years of partnership gone. The bank is calling our loans. Our investors are pulling out. The board is meeting in an hour to discuss my removal. Robert, I didn't know who she was. You didn't know who she was. So you decided to have a teenage girl arrested because she was sitting in first class while black. What is wrong with you? Vivian tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain that she had looked at a young black girl and automatically assumed she didn't belong in first class? How could she justify calling for police assistance because she didn't want to sit near someone who looked different from her? The media is calling. Robert continued. They want statements about why my wife had an innocent child handcuffed. Our friends are distancing themselves from us. Our country club is reviewing our membership. Vivian, you didn't just destroy our business. You destroyed our entire life. Across town at Titan Industries headquarters, Marcus Mitchell was implementing changes that would reshape the aviation industry for generations. He stood in the company's main conference room addressing his senior leadership team via video conference with executives from airlines around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began what happened to my daughter today cannot happen to anyone else's child tomorrow. Effective immediately. Titan Industries is implementing the Mitchell Protocol across all of our partnerships. The Mitchell Protocol was a comprehensive anti-discrimination program that would be mandatory for any airline receiving fuel from Titan Industries. It included real-time bias detection technology, mandatory sensitivity, training for all customer-facing employees, and immediate contract termination for any airline that failed to address discrimination complaints properly. Furthermore, Marcus continued, we're establishing the Zara Mitchell Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. This foundation will provide scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing careers in aviation and business, and it will fund legal representation for families facing discrimination in travel and hospitality. The response from airline executives was immediate and unanimous. They would comply with every requirement rather than lose access to Titan Industries' fuel supply. Delta Sky Airlines CEO Richard Anderson was the first to respond. Mr. Mitchell, on behalf of our entire company, I want to apologize for the treatment your daughter received. We're implementing immediate policy changes to ensure this never happens again. Mr. Anderson Marcus replied, Apologies are appreciated, but lasting change requires coordinated action. Every Delta employee will complete bias training within 30 days, or they will be terminated. Every discrimination complaint will be investigated by federal standards, not corporate standards. And your airline will fund diversity scholarships at 10 historically black colleges and universities. Anderson agreed without hesitation. Delta couldn't operate without Titan Industries' fuel supply. But the most important conversation was happening in a quiet corner of the terminal where Marcus Mitchell sat with his daughter, both of them finally able to breathe. Daddy, Zara said softly, "Did you really shut down an entire airline because of what happened to me?" "Sweetheart, I didn't shut down an airline because of what happened to you. I shut down an airline because of what they chose to do to you. There's a difference." Zara looked at her hands where the marks from the handcuffs were still visible. All those passengers who missed their flights, their meetings, their connections. I feel bad about that. Marcus lifted his daughter's chin so he could look into her eyes. "Zara, every one of those passengers witnessed what happened to you. They saw a teenage girl being humiliated and arrested for sitting while black. Some of them spoke up like Elena Rodriguez, but many of them just watched." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes baby girl people need to feel the consequences of injustice before they understand the importance of preventing it. Those passengers will remember today for the rest of their lives. They'll remember that staying silent when they witness discrimination has a cost." Elena Rodriguez approached their table, her phone still in hand, but no longer streaming. "Mr. Mitchell, Miss Mitchell," she said. "I wanted to thank you for what you did today. My live stream reached 1.2 million people, and the response has been incredible. People are sharing their own stories of discrimination, and they're demanding change." Marcus stood and shook Elena's hand. "Ms. Rodriguez, you documented the truth when it mattered most. That took courage. It took more courage for Zara to stay calm and dignified while adults were treating her like a criminal," Elena replied. "She's an inspiration." As the day wore on, the consequences continued to ripple outward. Officer Brennan was arrested by federal agents and charged with civil rights violations. Rebecca Santos was banned from working in aviation and faced potential criminal charges. Vivian Thornfield watched her family's fortune evaporate as her husband's business collapsed under the weight of canceled contracts. But the most important change was happening across the aviation industry, where airline executives were implementing new policies to prevent discrimination and protect passengers' dignity. The Mitchell Protocol became the gold standard for anti-discrimination practices in transportation. Other industries began adopting similar programs. Civil rights organizations praised the comprehensive approach to addressing bias at the organizational level. 6 months later, discrimination complaints in aviation had dropped by 78%. Not because racism had disappeared, but because airlines understood that the cost of enabling discrimination was higher than the cost of preventing it. Marcus Mitchell had proven that individual acts of racism could be met with coordinated acts of justice. He had shown that economic power, when directed purposefully, could create change that lasted far beyond headlines and social media trends. As father and daughter finally boarded their private jet to Boston, where Zara would attend her Harvard interview the next morning, Marcus reflected on the lesson his daughter had taught the world. Dignity was not negotiable. Justice was not optional. And sometimes the quiet strength of one 17-year-old girl could ground an airline and change an industry. Power. Marcus had always taught his daughter was not about having the loudest voice. It was about using whatever voice you had to lift others up. Today, Zara Mitchell's voice had been heard around the world. 3 months later, Zara Mitchell walked across the stage at Harvard University's early admission ceremony, accepting her place in the class of 2029. In the audience, Marcus Mitchell watched his daughter receive the recognition she had earned through years of hard work, knowing that no one would ever again question whether she belonged in any room she chose to enter. The Harvard acceptance wasn't just a personal victory for Zara. It had become a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity, proof that dignity maintained under pressure could open doors that seemed permanently closed. Elena Rodriguez had turned her documentation of Flight 447 into a feature-length documentary called Seat 1A, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature and donated all proceeds to the Zara Mitchell Foundation. The film became required viewing in diversity training programs across corporate America. I never imagined that live streaming a flight would change my entire career, Elena said in her acceptance speech. But witnessing Zara's grace under pressure reminded me that using our platforms responsibly means amplifying voices that need to be heard. The foundation had already distributed over $30 million in scholarships to underrepresented students pursuing careers in aviation, business, and law. Zara personally interviewed scholarship recipients, sharing her story and encouraging them to never let others' assumptions limit their dreams. Officer Jake Brennan had been convicted of civil rights violations and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. His conviction sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies nationwide, leading to mandatory bias training and accountability measures that had been resisted for decades. Rebecca Santos had moved back to her hometown in New Mexico, working in retail and slowly rebuilding her life. In interviews, she spoke honestly about how her assumptions and bias had destroyed her career and hurt an innocent teenager. I thought I was being professional, following protocols, she said in a documentary interview, but I was really just protecting my own comfort zone. Zara Mitchell deserved better, and I failed her completely. Vivian Thornfield had lost everything. Her husband's business had declared bankruptcy, their homes had been sold to pay creditors, and their social circle had abandoned them entirely. She now lived in a modest apartment and worked at a department store, a daily reminder of how quickly privilege could evaporate when built on prejudice rather than principle. But the most profound changes were happening in less visible ways. Airport police departments had implemented new de-escalation protocols specifically designed to address bias in passenger disputes. Flight attendants received extensive training on recognizing and countering discrimination. Airlines had established direct reporting lines for bias incidents with immediate investigation requirements. The Mitchell Protocol had been adopted by transportation companies worldwide, creating a new standard for dignity and equality in travel. Other industries were implementing similar programs, recognizing that the cost of discrimination far exceeded the cost of prevention. Marcus Mitchell had proven that individual wealth, when directed toward collective justice, could create lasting change. But the real legacy belonged to his daughter, who had shown the world that quiet strength could move mountains. On a crisp autumn day in Boston, Zara sat in her Harvard Business School classroom, leading a discussion on ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. Her professor had asked students to analyze a case study about discrimination in the aviation industry, not knowing that one of his students had lived through the events being discussed. The interesting thing about this case, one student said, is how quickly everything changed once someone with real power decided to act. It makes you wonder what other injustices could be addressed if more people with resources chose to use them purposefully. Zara raised her hand. I think the most important lesson isn't about power or resources, she said. It's about dignity. The person in this case study maintained her dignity even when adults were treating her like a criminal. She didn't scream or fight or lose control. She just refused to accept that other people's bias could define her worth. The professor nodded thoughtfully. That's an excellent point. Sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to be diminished by others' limitations. After class, Zara walked across Harvard Yard, her backpack slung over one shoulder, looking like any other college student. But she carried with her the knowledge that her experience had changed policies at hundreds of companies and inspired thousands of young people who had felt invisible or unwelcome in spaces where they belonged. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Saw your interview on CNN this morning. Proud of you for using your voice to lift others up. Mom and I love you." That evening, Marcus Mitchell was giving a keynote address to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's annual convention. His speech, titled "Power with Purpose," would be remembered as one of the most important addresses on corporate responsibility and social justice in modern history. 6 months ago, my daughter called me from an airplane where she was being discriminated against for the color of her skin, he told the audience. I could have handled that situation quietly behind closed doors with phone calls and legal settlements that nobody would ever hear about. He paused, looking out at the thousands of faces listening to every word. But quiet solutions to loud injustices don't create lasting change. They just postpone the next incident. My daughter's dignity was violated publicly, so the response needed to be public too. The world needed to see that actions have consequences, that bias has a price, and that silence in the face of discrimination is complicity. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. "But here's what I want you to remember," Marcus continued as the applause died down. "The real hero of this story isn't the billionaire father who grounded an airline. The real hero is the 17-year-old girl who kept her composure when adults were failing her. She showed us that dignity is a choice, that grace under pressure is power, and that sometimes sitting still when the world wants you to move is the bravest thing you can do." As Marcus left the stage, he thought about a conversation he'd had with Zara the night before. She had called to tell him about a letter she'd received from a young black girl in Mississippi who had been inspired by her story. "Daddy," she said, "she was going to apply to engineering school because she saw what happened to me and realized that she deserved to dream big too. That's when I knew that everything we went through was worth it. Power without purpose was just wealth, but power with purpose could change the world one inspired young person at a time." The legacy of Flight 447 wasn't just about accountability or justice. It was about the simple but revolutionary idea that every person, regardless of age or appearance, deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. And sometimes when that dignity was threatened, it took a father's love and a daughter's courage to remind the world that underestimating quiet strength was the most expensive mistake anyone could make. In the end, Zara Mitchell had done more than reclaim her seat in first class. She had secured a place for every young person who would travel after her, ensuring that their worth would never again be determined by others' assumptions. That was a legacy worth fighting for. That was power with purpose. And that was how an 18-minute confrontation on a delayed flight became a movement that changed an industry and inspired a generation to demand the dignity they deserved. If you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from, share this story. Because stories like this remind us that justice sometimes wears a Harvard sweatshirt and arrives with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth. Have you ever witnessed discrimination or been treated unfairly because of how you looked? Share your story in the comments below, because your voice matters. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Ring the notification bell so you never miss stories about justice, courage, and the power of standing up for what's right. Until next time, remember that dignity is always a choice, and choosing it can change everything. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to see that their worth is never determined by someone else's ignorance.